and they are most welcome. Now, to say that liberal democracy has been mobilized as a tool of oppression and domination shouldn't really come as any kind of momentous revelation to anyone. From its inception, liberal democracy was inseparable from empire, not only facilitating oppression, but actively legitimizing it. Western policymakers, philosophers, and scholars all advocated for liberal democracy as a universal model of governance, principles, and values. But in reality, liberal democracy is not universal at all. It's rigidly Western. It talks about freedom and equality, but only under its own terms. It decides what it means to be free, what it means to be rational, what it means to be educated, what it means to be civilized. And if society doesn't fit that mold, it's labeled as backwards, illiberal, in need of saving, in need of liberal democracy. This was how liberal democracy was used as a tool to justify intervention, assimilation, and domination for centuries. It wasn't just a political system, it was a missionary project. For example, Britain framed its colonization of India as a moral duty to bring liberal enlightenment to backwards people, to develop an allegedly inferior society. The same logic was applied to indigenous peoples in Native America, likewise by the French in Algeria. The insistence of rigid liberal democratic values, labeling anything that is incompatible with them as inherently illiberal, has meant that even when liberal democracy is used to address oppression, it often misses the target. This was also clear in the collapse of Western intervention in Afghanistan. Western powers cast themselves as democratic saviors, promising freedom and modernization. They painted a stark, dichotomous moral battle between the oppressive Islamic order and all of its illiberal, extremist, tyrannical values versus the enlightened capitalist West. Nowhere was this clearer than in the West's hyperfixation over the veil as the ultimate symbol of oppression, compared to the free Western woman. Thus, the choice that Afghans were presented with was not a choice at all, but an ultimatum. Accept the modern liberal democratic order of the West, or remain chained to their Islamic values, cast as inherently incompatible with progress and freedom. For Afghans, this was not emancipation, but foreign domination, draped in self-righteous rhetoric. The Taliban capitalized on this, easily painting the Western project as culturally imperialist. The consequences of failing to focus on the true source of oppression can still be seen today. Now, of course, a conversation on the oppressive nature of the liberal democratic order would not be complete without talking about its economic dimension. Even after nations in the global south won their independence, Western liberal democracies still found new ways to impose their value preferences, this time through economic control. How? Through economic assistance, structural readjustment programs. The message to the global south was clear. You will receive aid, but only if you open your markets to the so-called blessings of free trade and liberal economic policy. Real blessings, but certainly not to the global south. The policies of deregulation, privatization, and austerity that countries like Zimbabwe, Ghana, and Senegal had to adopt meant that the role of the state was minimized. Domestic industries were left unprotected, and nations were pushed into a global marketplace that they simply could not compete in. The results? Great, if you're in the West. You got cheap resources to exploit cheap labor, and new markets to tap into. But the global south? Their developing industries collapsed under global competition. The drain from the global south through unequal exchange totaled $62 trillion in real terms. If this value had been retained by the south and contributed to southern growth, it would be worth $152 trillion today. Now, this isn't just an unfortunate side effect of free trade, it's the system working exactly as it was designed. Wealth was extracted from the periphery and funneled back into the imperial core. Structural readjustment programs, far from creating prosperity, facilitated the greatest peacetime transfer of wealth in history. Of course, we cannot have a speech on liberal democracy without also talking about its inherent hypocrisy. How many times have liberal democracies used rhetoric of liberal democratic values to justify military interventions, regime changes, and outright war, only for those same interventions to install dictators and suppress independence movements? The answer is at least 70 confirmed cases by the United States alone since 1947. Take Iran in 1953, where the US and the UK overthrew the democratically elected prime minister after he nationalized Iran's oil industry, only to install the Shah, ushering in decades of authoritarian rule. Again, Iraq in 1958, where when a nationalist uprising overthrew the Western-backed monarchy, the US orchestrated yet another coup. Fast forward to Libya in 2011, the Western intervention left a failed state plagued by civil war. Then there's Egypt. For decades, the US supported Hosni Mubarak's dictatorship, and when Mubarak's successor was overthrown in another coup, they immediately backed his replacement, another authoritarian leader. And what of Palestine? Here, the West's commitment to human rights is nowhere to be found. We see not intervention, but complicity. The same powers that claim to uphold liberal democracy fund and arm an occupation that has dispossessed an entire people for over 75 years. This is the reality of liberal democracy as practiced by the West. Now, you might argue that in these actions, the West was not practicing true liberal democracy. But if Western governments claim to be liberal democracies, but consistently act in ways that betray those principles, then either A, liberal democracy is too weak to prevent imperialism, oppression, and domination, or B, Liberal democracy is simply a convenient ideological mask for imperialism, oppression, and capitalistic domination. Either way, the conclusion is the same. Liberal democracy has failed the global south. Thank you.
Wow, she has made very valid point about liberal democracy, like how in the name of liberal democracy, the world actually, especially global south, has been exploited. That is very much true, and I do agree with the way she's making her point, like about liberal democracy and how it has exploitative nature. But there are certain things like if you really want to understand more about how this world system actually works, there is a scholar named Immanuel Wallerstein, if I'm not wrong, and he has given the idea of world system theory, and where he does talk about the world system is divided into three parts. First part is core, like core means very well developed countries that are part of core, like European countries, and then semi-periphery. Semi-periphery countries includes India, China, and Brazil, and then comes periphery countries includes Ghana and many more African countries, which has been exploited. So all three categories actually indicates how world system actually works. And Wallerstein argues Western countries, in the name of promoting liberal democracy, they have exploited semi-periphery, and semi-periphery after their independence, when they get much better condition, even they are the part of exploiting periphery countries. So that's how the world system actually works. So my first question is like, it is about liberal democracy. I believe that liberal democracy does have a good side because it does talk about rule of law. It does talk about liberty. Liberty is never having liberty is a privilege. Why I'm saying it in today's time, because you have bunch of Middle Eastern countries where I don't think this kind of debate take place could have taken place, like where this lady is debating. I think it is Oxford Union, which is located in England, and England is a liberal democratic country. The father of liberalism actually he comes from England, like John Locke. So this is very ironical. Like these Western countries, they came in global South and they exploited all over the global South, and still even they went back to like their country due to resistance in these countries. Still, except India, we don't have democratic country. So don't we should ask question to ourselves, why don't we have democracy? Even after British, they went back to their country and they left the country. This is the first question which I'm raising. The second question is China and semi-periphery, which has been talked by Wallerstein. Don't we think China has become one of the colonial power in from like Asian continent? Ask this question to yourself. Like, where is human rights? When I'm saying where is human right, it means human right somehow associated with liberal democracy, where human dignity is supreme. Like you can take example of Xinjiang front, like Xinjiang area, how people they've been actually exploited, normally exploited, killed by Chinese military. If China has like what alternative you can give it to China? Because China does not follow liberal democratic norms. Russia does not follow liberal democratic norms. So then, and that's where I think, at least in liberal democracy, you can resist, you can ask questions, you have every right to, like ask questions. You get a space where you can speak. But in theocratic regime as well as in authoritarian regime, you don't have that right. That was my question. These countries, Brazil, China, India, when they are getting stronger, what they are doing? They are making a better society, or like they are contributing to something which we can say that it is alternative of Western democracy. We need to rethink. We need to ask this question to ourselves: what alternative do we have? What we are promoting as a country? I come from India. That is why I'm saying that what India actually, how India is contributing to the world. Somehow we remain democracy from 1947 to till date, and still we are like well functioning democracy. And then the third question, like, see, I always believe people, no matter from which kind of system you come from, like especially I'm talking about in the context of liberal democracy, liberalism, liberal democracy as an idea, it it can be good, but until unless people who are the part of this system, their intention, their intentions are not good, trust me, no democracy will function. Like Ambedkar says, Indian democracy, like the good constitution, only work when people or our leaders' intention are good. So ultimately, it is people who is running a country. Ultimately, it is the people who is like ultimately it is leaders who is going to run countries and who is already running many countries. So if until unless their intentions are not good, no democracy will function. So it is not only fault about liberal democracy; it is fault of like we as a humans also, like from the civilization we come from, what kind of alternative it does give to us, whether it does talk about equal opportunity, whether it treats human equally, and whether it discriminate people on the basis of caste, creed, and religion, then we have every right to question what liberal democracy have contributed to us and